no!
Hey Bandicooters. Now, in the previous episode I said that we'll be taking a look at some even crazier people next. However, I think these folks are around the same level of crazy as the last group. Maybe, I don't know. I'll leave that all up to you, I suppose. So, remember last time when I discussed Crash fans' attempt at trolling to get Rillaroo placed in the Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled? Well, here we have a similar situation occurring once more. Now, if these people continue to be successful, we might as well call the game Meme Team Racing Meme Field. And, just like the last time, people are already unironically loving this extremely obscure Crash character. Now, just who exactly am I talking about? Well, that would be Mr. Crumb. Oh, haven't heard of him? Now, I bet right here you'd expect me to say, not a surprise, but it's probably the other way around by now, as that's all Crash fans are talking about at the moment. The character originates from the game known as Crash Bandicoot 99X, which is a Tiger Electronics handheld game from 1998. Mr. Crumb is an evil ghost character that happens to be the main antagonist within that game. So, let's now take a look at what's currently going on within the Crash Bandicoot fanbase. Alright, so I don't exactly know where the whole Mr. Crumb thing actually started on the subreddit. I think it had to do with some sort of art that somebody drew, and I'm not sure which piece of artwork it was that kicked the Mr. Crumb obsession off, but this is the first one that I've seen. Here's a post by Matana_ that says complete list of the most wanted characters by fans in order according to the socials. And then we have Velo on top, Viscount behind Velo, and then Mr. Crumb below Viscount, and then all these other characters below. And this was a while back, so who knows, Mr. Crumb might be at the fucking very top now, but obviously we don't know if this is real or not. It's Maddie says,
a literal who nobody knew about a week ago over the evil twins and Willy Wumpa Cheeks. This fucking community, I swear to God.
Fretless94 says,
that's what happens when the community picks a meme character.
Hound of Tyndalaw says,
yeah, the meme character who is a meme for being the most obscure possible character that popped up just a hot minute ago is wanted more than the evil twins Rusty and evil Crash. It's just dumb in the moment meme stuff.
Put That Cat Down says,
it's honestly embarrassing. Y'all already got your meme character with Rilla. Can y'all chill for a moment?
I mean, I agree. Dany Q94 says,
everybody calm down. This list is clearly not based on any actual sources. It just says according to the socials, but there's no estimate, no percentage. I think it's just fake.
Zorro the Great says,
alright, I know I'm the one who made that crumb design and all, but it's kind of ridiculous that he's way up there. Don't get me wrong, I still support his inclusion, but not before the majority of these.
And so even the one who started the thing, I guess, fucking is tired of this. So here Dany Q94 is talking about how he's going to interview one of the creators of Crash Bandicoot 99X, and he's asking what kind of questions would the subreddit like him to ask him. And we'll get to that interview here in a bit, because he actually did pull through with the interview. Now, here's some artwork by Mr. Capito 90. And here he is saying that, he doesn't mind him to come into CTR and possibly new Crash games and stuff. Here's some artwork by Rickatan, and they say that they tried to make it similar to Undertale's Sans, but following Crash's style. And Dany Q94 says,
I thought that if even Japan was hit by Mr. Crumb, this subreddit is quite popular all over the world.
And Rickatan talks about how he's talked with several other Japanese fans, and they really love Mr. Crumb. Rose Supreme says,
okay, well, I'm not on the whole Mr. Crumb bandwagon thing. This is pretty wholesome.
Zorro the Great says,
hey, I really love the walking stick you gave him. Why didn't I think of that in my own concept? Haha. I'm surprised word of Crumb has reached Japan as well. A week ago, nobody knew who he was, but then a couple of fan arts later, and he's become rather well known now, at least within the subreddit.
So here's a post by Fireboy759. And he's asking if anyone else is fed up with the meme character requests. And he says,
alright, let's be completely honest here. Raise your hand if you genuinely want to see obscure random characters nobody has likely even heard of, Mr. Crumb especially, or unnamed significant characters, Lab Assistant, Warthog, any of the Titans, make it onto the roster before the rest of the major players, Emperor Velo, Willy Wumpa, and the Viscount. I'm honestly getting fed up with the ridiculous character requests. It feels like most of the time the people requesting them don't actually want them as so much as they're just doing it for the meme. A la Rilla God Roo. While the joke was fun with him, now it's just getting repetitive and old. I don't think anybody genuinely wants the ability to play as Lab Assistant number 621 or a random Warthog. And frankly, it's pretty insulting that there's more requests for these random characters than actual major characters like Emperor Velo or the Viscount. Doubly so for Emperor Velo. I've seen genuine arguments that he shouldn't be put in because he's just a skin and a waste of a slot. Like, what the actual heck?
Lucas O. Intoxicado says,
The lab assistant is more recognizable than 3/4 of the roster of the game, my dude. I literally had to Google the Viscount when you mentioned him. Which one of those two characters would bring more excitement? The fact is that Crash has run out of relevant characters. We don't really have any other big characters that are missing in this game.
Knight of Spades says,
Plus, the lab assistant drove cars in Warped. Makes sense to add him.
Limburg92X says,
The lab assistants are even shown driving carts in this game, Dingo Canyon, and the cart they drive is the Six Pipes car.
An fuck these fucking names. An Artkist says,
You not knowing of the main villain of a spin-off Crash game does not make the character any less relevant. Viscount's character and personality is perfectly fine and good. The problem is he appeared in a game the community would rather forget, because gameplay and content-wise the game was awful. But again, Viscount as a character is great. Meanwhile, the lab assistants are nothing more than just lackeys, mass-produced minions with no character, personality, or anything that makes them an individual. They're the cannon fodder, red shirts, lesser minions not much above the armadillos that walk back and forth in a platformer level. It's like saying lab assistant should be in before Ripperoo, Nina, or Embryo, because those three had less game appearances. To me, even though I haven't played Crash Boom Bang, the game Viscount appeared in, I'd still rather see a named character with a personality Beanox can capitalize on rather than a bland android who's programmed to be a minor roadblock.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with that. He continues to say,
Now, if Beanox decides to take a lab assistant, say it gone rogue, and grew a personality, is named Labo or Assistor, and becomes a major character like how Mr. Bones is a Star Wars battle droid, made its own unique thing, then you have me on board.
1SABY says,
More people played the original 3 games plus Wrath of Cortex where lab assistants appeared than Boom Bang.
replying to a quote from him, and then replying to another quote from him saying,
It's not, those are actually popular characters.
yeah, well, the thing is that Viscount is actually a popular character too. Now, lab assistants and such, not even actual fucking characters. A warthog is not a fucking actual character. It's just a warthog that you ride within a level of Crash Bandicoot. Catalyst comment says,
I agree about Mr. Crumb, but lab assistant is definitely not a meme request. Do you think Viscount is actually more popular and recognizable than lab assistant?
All's Quiet says,
I have to agree with this. Lab assistants have been in at least 4 games and have an important role as the main reoccurring enemy. It's not a meme request. If only one enemy gets in, it should be him. Plus all the costume possibilities. Meanwhile, sure, the Viscount, the main antagonist from his game, but let's be honest, he's less remembered than even Rillaroo and Yaya Panda were, and his game was and is seen as a black mark on the franchise.
that part doesn't fucking matter.
Why would anyone want that back? He's a nobody.
What? This is pretty, ironic here. That, he's a nobody. The lab assistants are nobodies. They're not characters. They're just generic background enemies. What, it's important to you because of the costumes? Have you taken a look around Nitro-fueled recently? A lot of the characters are getting costumes. This just seems kind of silly. He says,
And I don't want to see the Warthog either. Unlike Polar and Pura, who at least had a modicum of personality in Crash 2 and 3, the Warthog, it's just a Warthog, people.
just like the lab assistant is just a lab assistant.
And Ernest is a joke too, literally.
Ernest at least had lines. He at least talked. He was in at least one cutscene where he said something. And he at least has a fucking name. He's at least an individual. But, I mean, I personally don't care that much about Ernest, but he is at least just better of a choice than the lab assistant. Obviously, this is just almost pretty much objective.
The whole point of the character is poking fun.
He puts character in quotes right there. This is so fucking ironic.
The whole point of the character is poking fun at NPC quest givers in other games. On screen for less than 30 seconds and is a complete throwaway. Don't get me started on Mr. Crumb.
Fireboy759 says,
A lab assistant is still a random generic unnamed enemy that has no significant traits to set it apart from other lab assistants. At least the Viscount is actually a unique named character.
and then Draft Draw says,
People get this, but they still don't seem to care, unfortunately. It's mentality like this that has Mario Kart be flooded with random enemies and a gigantic lack of major or minor characters from the Mario franchise. But hey, the lab assistants might be enemies, but they're from the first 3 games, so they're objectively and automatically a better choice than anything that came after. Already saw people unironically also wanting Tribesmen, Venus Flytrap, and Cyborg Lizard.
yeah, it's getting pretty fucking weird. Dany Q94 says,
I don't understand the problem. As for Mr. Crumb, I think it's great that the fanbase is redesigning the character and imagining him in Crash Team Racing Nitro-fueled. No one is being hurt. Although we are not trying to want Mr. Crumb before other characters, especially Viscount. We want Mr. Crumb with the others.
This is funny because of what he says later.
We want Mr. Crumb with the others who deserve to be in the game. We don't want Mr. Crumb before others. I prefer when we talk about Mr. Crumb, Viscount, Amberly, and even Ernest rather than an anonymous lab assistant or tribesman, by the way.
Man Dude CB says,
That's not how requesting works. If every single post in a sub is about some dumb meme like Mr. Crumb, then how can Beanox know that you want other characters over him? They're not superhumans, they can't read people's minds. You simply don't request a character if you'd rather have something else.
Dany Q94 replies and says,
Alright, find me a meme about Mr. Crumb in this sub, because what I see here are very good fan art, not stupid images.
Mandude CB says,
Every post about it is a dumb meme. It's a random, uninteresting Hasbro-owned character from a cheap licensed game.
Dany Q94 says,
Here we simply enter into subjective thinking. Mr. Crumb has an interesting concept for being a Crash character. That you don't like him, I can be understood. But don't take it for granted that your thought is the truth, because it's not.
What the fuck? Why is he speaking like this? What the fuck is this? Is he on drugs? Dany Q continues by saying,
But then, this isn't a race for whoever gets into the game first. There's space for everyone.
Mandude CB replies,
That has nothing to do with what I said. If all I see of somebody is posts about a random character, how am I supposed to know that they actually want some other character more prioritized?
Dany Q94 says,
It's a pretty simple speech. It's clear there are more important characters to prioritize, and Beanox knows it. There are already almost all the characters scheduled for the next Grand Prix, so yours is an unfounded concern.
Zoro the Great says,
I genuinely want Mr. Crumb. I try to make myself look as non-memey as possible when I make that point. Do I want him in if it means stealing a slot from Twinsanity characters, Velo, Viscount, and Willy Wumpa-Cheeks? No. I understand what I understand what priorities are. I waited for the trilogy bosses to make it in before I could expect Yaya, and I'm going to do the same here.
Greg628 says,
Yes, the requests are getting so absolutely ridiculous that I'm just waiting for people to start asking for background props from previous games to be turned into playable characters. E.g., please let us play as a pile of snow from Crash 2. It's a very important character.
Crash-Smash-Bash says,
I really feel it goes without saying that the top priority picks are Velo, Willy, the twins, Viscount, Evil Crash, and Emberly. Like, it's glaringly obvious, probably not talking about them because it's old news. Lab Assistant, Rusty, Ernest, and Bearminator are maybes, but everything else after that is straight up cringe. Not gonna lie though, Mr. Crumb is actually sounding kind of interesting now, not his minions.
B13CW says,
Dude, I'm so fucking sick of Mr. Crumb. I've kept my mouth shut about it to avoid being negative, but now it's just getting fucking ridiculous. I had to say it somewhere.
Palimpiastro says,
As one of the guys behind the Crumb Crew meme, it's not really a meme. Most of us do indeed want him in the game. However, if he doesn't become a big deal in the Crash community and Beanox notices, it's unlikely that it would happen. And it works. In a few days now, hundreds of people know about the character. His page is one of the most viewed on Bandipedia, and countless redesigns and fan art is being made. It's so cool, and that's why I love this community.
That's why I fucking hate this community.
You guys are creative and can find potential even behind a Tiger Game character. I'm indifferent to the generic enemies, to be honest. I'm more hyped for Willy the Viscount and Fake Velo, which I really hope will be unlocked with developer times.
GarloPet88 says,
You're right, people should ask for more known characters with names and personalities, instead of some others nobody heard of or cared about. Instead of asking for Emperor Velo or Madame Emberly, some people ask for Bearminator or Mr. Crumb, which is a shame to see these get more love and requests more than the other important characters.
K-Dog says
he wants real characters, immediately asks for Willy Wumpa-Cheeks. Okay, lol.
Says Willy Wumpa-Cheeks is not a real character. Has fake Crash as his flair in the Crash Bandicoot subreddit. Cup of Coffee to Go says,
You are absolutely right, they don't want them. They are just seeing how much more they can milk from Beanox. It's all a big joke for them, demanding everyone in their aunt in the game now. They realize that if they make enough buzz, Beanox will eventually do whatever they ask for. That is what's leaving us with a dark, foreseeable future. The roster is already full of characters that aren't quite good enough and are being forgotten by the player base already. Most of them have a right to be in, but if Komodo Mo is being forgotten despite his rightful addition, what can we expect for a generic Hawk?
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
People also request Tribesmen, which is basically the same as Lab Assistants, filler, one-dimensional characters. One could argue that Lab Assistants are a gigantic opportunity for skins, but if they neglect Geary, do you really think they'll get the 10+ Lab Assistant skins they expect?
Exactly. This guy's pretty on point here.
And the people who want the Venus Flytrap in, well, I think they just lost their copy of Mario Kart.
Yeah.
We already know that Megamix is coming, sadly. But after that, and after getting Willy, Viscount, and the robot Velo, they should just stop. This isn't the Sgt. Pepper's album cover. With that said, memers are a cancer in this community by now, and I fear that Beanox is already taking notice of
I almost said Cum Crew.
And I fear that Beanox is already taking notice of Crumb Crew. They, and all of us, need to have respect for the series, and need to advocate for a more adequate and respectable roster. Less is more. I think we would be better off with a more refined and memorable roster, one that isn't based on jokes or meme campaigns. But if the average person in this forum upvotes a request for the metal crate as a racer, then we are doomed.
Draftdraw says,
For me, the ridiculous come with everything after Farmer Ernest. As much as people like to meme him, he's a genuine named character that, albeit minor, would be very weird not to include if Beanox brings over every single other Twinsanity character, and most likely all others in the franchise.
Well, I would say, I mean, Farmer Ernest is a pretty, minor character. But, I mean, he's at least more of a character than a lab assistant. But I don't think Farmer Ernest should have much priority, but, I mean, I guess, he's still a character, I guess.
Now, manga characters, extremely obscure characters, I wouldn't say many of these are meme picks, but it's just very wishful thinking and kind of misguided to think BMOX is going to include random enemies, cut characters, and manga characters before even Ernest or Rusty Walrus make it in. And if they do that, it would be stupid, but then again, I'd still play it. But personally, I truly don't care about non-characters and random picks for the roster. Having every single named character in the series plus 4 new characters and possibly even more new characters plus 5 Spyro characters surely will satisfy everyone, right? Though you'd actually be surprised at how many people genuinely think a lab assistant and a warthog deserved to make it in before the Crash Nitro Kart and Crash Tag Team Racing characters, and even now before all of those remaining characters.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I mentioned in the last video at the end. I was talking about how there was all these people that just were trying to keep all these major characters out and instead say like, no, include lab assistant, include a fucking warthog, include tribesmen. Like, what the fuck? And they would get so pissed too if anybody says like, yeah, I'd like to see the tag team characters in and shit like that. And they would just be like, no, you gotta include the warthog, man. A fucking warthog. That's the real OG right there.
Not against their inclusion, but getting them over and before the unique characters.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with that. Like, I'm definitely not against their inclusion, but I definitely think that actual characters should come first. That should be the priority.
Also, the Rillaroo joke was already repetitive and old with him as it was.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, he got downvoted. Here's another comment by Draft Draw on the post of this artwork right here, saying,
are people unironically making a bigger deal about Mr. Crumb than Fake Velo, Willy Wumpa Cheeks, Evil Twins, Meta Man, Evil Crash, Terminator, Farmer Ernest, Rusty Walrus, Viscount, and Megamix? Come on, Mr. Crumb would be kind of fun, but why is he getting so much attention and artificially being spammed while the other characters are barely even talked about when they would be the most realistic choices for Crash Team Racing?
B13CW replies saying,
I've been trying not to be negative about it, but it's getting ridiculous to be honest, I totally agree.
Zorro the Great says,
I'm just interested in spreading the idea. I know all the characters you listed are far more likely, and I'm sure everyone would agree. Hell, I want to do some Bearminator and Evil Twins concepts after I'm done with Crumb. I've just been having fun with Crumb, and he's freed me from art block, and now I'm happy of him even being in polls and lists, and all of this happened in like a week. People started to notice and see how cool a ghost character would be. They have someone new to talk about and consider. It's not all thinking he's more likely than others, at least in my opinion.
Draft Draw replies saying,
yeah, a ghost character is surprisingly something Crash lacks, so I'm totally down for Mr. Crumb, but I just want all others before him, because I think right now they deserve it more. But I'm a lot more hyped for Crumb than, say, generic enemies as racers.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer Mr. Crumb over these other generic enemies like lab assistants and shit like that. Zorro the Great replies,
I just hope that I don't get labeled the Crumb spammer just because I'm having fun with the character, so that's why I want to spice things up with other characters while not ignoring Crumb. Hell, I'll probably give it a few days before I post a new drawing.
Draft Draw replies,
your art is great and genuine. It's the amount of troll copycats that are spam.
Now here's the interview that Dany Q94 did with one of the creators of Crash Bandicoot 99X. And at the beginning here it says,
I was contacted a few days ago by George F., surname obscured according to his request. After he saw my video on Crash Bandicoot 99X, he was kindly willing to answer some questions that Reddit users wanted to ask. Enjoy your reading. Hi George, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is George F. I'm an electronic toy and video game developer. I was involved in the Tiger 99X Games project. Thanks to this, I was involved in the Crash Bandicoot for Tiger 99X development. I currently develop some electronic video games for various companies.
The video game Crash Bandicoot 99X seems rather atypical for a Crash game. Monsters, demons, horror themes, where did the idea of a horror-themed game come from?
Well, you shouldn't see it as a real horror game. The team knew Crash Bandicoot was like a Warner Brothers cartoon, so we were inspired by movies like The Night of the Living Duck or Daffy Duck's Crackbusters. The hardware did the rest.
Having a totally new and exclusive story, Crash Bandicoot 99X also featured completely new characters. What was the inspiration for the new characters introduced in the game?
The team was inspired by the Looney Tunes cartoons. Mr. Crumb, the main villain, was inspired by Count Bloodcount. The Mummy was inspired by Gossamer. The Skeleton was inspired by the Devil from the movie Looney Bugs Bunny movie. I don't remember the inspiration for the tree exactly. I think it was inspired by Tweety turned into a monster. The team loved Warner cartoons, and we also loved Crash.
About these characters, we wonder if they belong to Tiger, bought by Hasbro, or Universal. Can you tell us more about that?
Universal, absolutely. Universal owned everything we made for Crash Bandicoot 99X. I still remember what was said between us on the team. We're working for Universal. I wish that was the case. We wondered why Universal wanted to own characters like the ones we made. We were told that it was done to prevent legal problems in the future, and to have more characters to use in the franchise. My children and today my nephews are still playing Crash Bandicoot. I've never seen any of the characters we created.
Okay, there's a few things as I'm reading this that seem a little bit off that make this interview seem a bit fake. In my opinion. That's just my opinion. I'm kind of skeptical of this interview, but I don't know. Maybe it's real. Who knows? I don't know.
We knew that Crash Bandicoot 99X could be connected to the computer to unlock downloadable content in the game. So what was this downloadable content for the game?
A couple of extra levels and time trials. That's all I remember.
Are you still following the Crash Bandicoot series? If so, what's your favorite character?
My nephews and I are playing Crash Bandicoot Trilogy and the racing remake. It's a vibrant and colorful world just as I remember it. It's like playing a cartoon. My favorite character, Crash Bandicoot, of course.
What do you think about the recent rediscovery of your video game and your characters and things like fan art they received recently? What do you think of the prospect of adding Mr. Crumb to the Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled roster?
I've only learned about all of this in the last few days. Some of my old colleagues contacted me and said, George, somebody has noticed our video game. And I was like, what? I'm really glad to hear that Crash Bandicoot fans have discovered our work. I want them to know that we love Crash. Mr. Crumb and Crash Team Racing, that would be great. I'd like to show my family that a character created by my team has come so far. Who knows? It's good to hope.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This interview just seems fucking fake. Let me know what you think, I guess, in the comments. Maybe I'm just too much of a fucking skeptic.
Mr. Crumb, Mr. Cruel, Mr. Croon. So many names for one character. Is there a reason behind all these names?
Mr. Croon was just temporary. In some versions of the game, this is his name. There were internal debates about the character's name. Then one guy who worked with us said, let's just call him that. His name, jokingly enough, is entirely Croon Cruel Crumb, but officially it's just Mr. Crumb. I'm sure there are versions of the game where Mr. Cruel looks slightly different in appearance, but I don't know if they're still around somewhere.
What is Mr. Crumb's nationality and history? Do you have a concept art of this character?
Mr. Crumb is a stingy, evil, unsociable rich man. Before he died of natural causes, he used black magic to awaken supernatural monsters, becoming one of them too, probably because he didn't want to leave his treasure to strangers. We never considered a nationality for this character, but I would see him well with a Scottish accent. Unfortunately, I don't have any concept art with me. Maybe an old colleague, Paul, has it, but I can do a little sketch of how I remember Mr. Crumb's concepts. Sorry about the poor quality of the sketch. I haven't drawn for a long time.
And here's the sketch. Once again, I have no idea if any of this is actually real. You know, this may just be this guy trying to get this character into the game and give him a Scottish accent and all this kind of shit and give him that type of design. I don't know.
Besides Crash Bandicoot 99X, have you made any other video games we might have played?
I kept working on digital games for companies like McDonald's. You may remember the Sonic the Hedgehog electronic games or Spyro's electronic game, the one set in a maze.
I don't know, man. This whole thing just kind of screams bullshit to me.
Thanks for all your answers, George. Thanks to your answers, we'll know a lot more about one of the most obscure games in the Crash Bandicoot series. Have a nice day.
Thanks to you and thanks to Crash fans for discovering this whole game. May the mask be with you.
Now we'll read some comments for that interview. So Draft Draw says,
Sad that such an interesting interview was made only for people to meme and promote Mr. Crumb to Crash Team Racing. Wonder when will people interview Paul Gardner for background on Madame Amberly or Perky Pickle on Willie? Answer, they won't.
yeah, and I don't think this guy actually interviewed one of the creators of Crash Bandicoot 99X either. I'm really skeptical of this interview. Green Mean 1 says,
Madame Amberly isn't a meme pick. I always thought everyone was joking about her.
Draft Draw applies saying,
She's an important character as far as the story goes, as well as a boss in a platformer game. She and the twins are the only platformer bosses not included yet. Also, I never saw anyone memeing her other than one occasion of people saying she's the prettiest Crash character. Only ones I've seen memed are Farmer, Ernest, and Willie to a lesser extent, but those are also very much wanted unironically by some and have been asked for a long time, instead of a week. Willie understandably so, since other than Fake Velo, he's the most important character not yet in Crash Team Racing.
Green Mean 1 says,
Honestly, I thought it was a joke the whole time.
These people, it's so ironic. Dude, you have a Rillaroo flare. I don't know, it's so funny to point this stuff out. Dany Q94, the guy who apparently did the apparent interview, says,
Let's not kid ourselves. Except if Viscount and Velo, all demands are mean. It's not bad, though.
What the fuck is this guy on? When whatever the fuck that name is says,
I'm pretty sure Viscount is one of the stronger memes.
and he says that with Baby T as his flair. Of course, these people have no self-awareness. Draft Draw says,
People genuinely like the Viscount, though. He's got a good design and potential, much like Yaya, though this is something I believe for any remaining character most definitely. Also, they said about the Viscount before Willie and the twins, who are genuine picks, not memes.
and then whatever this person's name is, says,
Having followed character demands since the game was first announced, I've noticed a development trend exemplified by Yaya Panda, Rillaroo, and Fasty/Trippo. Number 1, obscure character excavated for the lulz. Number 2, obscure character becomes a hot meme. Number 3, obscure character Number 3, obscure character organically develops a genuine affection among a growing segment of the fans. Number 4, a movement is founded to petition for this obscure character's inclusion unironically. Number 5, obscure character makes it into the game and is thus now mainstream and no longer obscure. I think Viscount is moving between stages 2 and 3 at the moment.
Draft Draw replies,
That's not true. Do you think everyone who wants Willie, the evil twins, evil Crash, Madame Amberly, Rusty, Ernest, and Bearminator are memeing? Only one that has a case of memeing mostly is Farmer Ernest, but many do want him for completion's sake and or because they like him too. All others are either important characters or important minor characters. Me and many others want these characters unironically, some also want Mr. Crumb unironically, but the traction gained with him is entirely meme-based, like what happened with Rillaroo. It's almost as if people are trying to replicate that. I mean, Mr. Crumb seemingly becoming more wanted than every single other character people have been requesting. Such a thing wouldn't possibly happen without memeing.
Bretty Hatburger says,
Honestly, the it characters that are meme picks at this point are Ernest and Mr. Crumb, in my opinion. Amberly and Willy are both really important to their stories, especially Amberly, as she is part of the main antagonist's backstory. Some want Bearminator because he is seen as the last PS1 boss in the Crash games. You're kidding if you think the evil twins are in the meme category. Rusty Walrus is kind of in the middle. This is coming from a guy that actually wants him. While some want him because of nostalgia and that he is actually kind of interesting, and that he would have been a reoccurring character if Traveler's Tales wasn't killed off, others want him because of memes, although barely anyone talks about him at all. Ernest and Crumb just came out of nowhere, honestly, but although some people genuinely wanted the former due to similar reasons to Rusty, the latter just came out of nowhere without rhyme or reason. Viscount was seen as a meme pick, but now it seems like he is starting to get his fair share of fans too, more than the twins and Amberly, in fact.
Draft Draw replies saying,
This, everyone knows that other than Ernest, every previous character has been mostly asked for legit reasons, and Ernest mostly for completion's sake, because why add everyone else but not him? And I've seen big fans of him duo to the character's simplicity being his charm. Mr. Crumb has just been artificially pushed out of nowhere. People have actually been asking for all the previous characters for a long time at different levels. Crumb just came out of nowhere, and while I don't mind him joining, having him in before all those characters we have been waiting and asking for would be lame.
yeah, I agree with that.
I also forgot Megamix, and even he has more of a reason to be added before Crumb and has his share of fans.
And then Mixture Lady, which is like the biggest Mega Mix fan ever, she says,
Well, Megamix wasn't a meme since not too many people asked for him, and the others said what can be an interesting pick of Beanox, and we know what will happen soon. Mr. Crumb meme start to the data mine for Rustland because, you know.
just broken English. I don't know what she's trying to say there. Draft Draw replies saying,
Yeah, Megamix was a character people picked to talk about future characters to add to CCR, albeit in smaller number.
Dany Q94 says,
With the only difference that Mr. Crumb has no meme, he has fan art and redesign made with excellent quality by fans. Rillaroo had a lot of shitposting and few quality fan art, you have to admit. In any case, I don't want to go against you. I think you and I are simply saying the same thing. There's no point in thinking who will come first or who will come next in the roster.
Draft Draw replies saying,
There's a bunch of Crumb memes. Before the fan arts, the memes were all about how minor he was and the fact he wasn't going to be in Crash Team Racing. I've seen quality Rillaroo art too, but it's barely posted on the sub since again, many people see him as a joke and a legit character, which saddens me. And yeah, I'd like to see Mr. Crumb in, but not before the other characters people have been asking for a long time.
Giancho says,
Does it even matter which one comes first? We had Yaya Panda, and I love her, before freaking Emperor Velo, and no one complained about that. Besides, it's pretty obvious that if Mr. Crumb ever comes to CTR, and I don't think he will, there's no way characters like Viscount or Amberly won't be considered. You're really complaining just for the sake of it.
Draft Draw replies saying,
It does because we don't know how many Grand Prix there will be. Characters might not make it in. A lot of people complained and are still complaining about Emperor Velo not being in the game yet. You just don't see it a lot on the sub. I'm also disappointed he and Willy aren't in yet, especially because it's pretty obvious Velo and Willy were supposed to come in December but were replaced by Yaya and or Hasty. Considered, yes, it's not a guarantee they're coming. If people keep asking for enemies, more guest characters, and super obscure characters before the console and important handheld characters, then Beanox might get the wrong message and think people want them more, purely based on circle jerking memes and Twitter spam.
Giancho says,
You're giving spam too much credit. Beanox will not add the skunk from Twinsanity just because people ask for it. I'm pretty sure they have already decided the characters that will come in the next months.
Draft Draw replies saying,
And who do you think are these characters? Surprisingly, people do spam Skunk, Venus Flytrap, Warthog, and manga characters, and a bunch of Spyro characters that even go well beyond the Spyro 3 cast, to Beanox, and all of those posts receive a bunch of likes. Now, barely anyone is asking for the remaining major characters and minor characters, and instead spamming for the most obscure characters, from toys to extra cutscenes to random enemies, to cut characters and trying to say why they should be in.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Meanwhile, those who quietly wait for the twins or Amberly or Viscount and Rusty get worried because Beanox might not even put them in if people aren't talking about them. Only ones for me that are locks for now are Velo and Willy, but only because they've been data mined before and as such are planned. And if you say why you think Farmer Ernest is more deserving than a random enemy, you get called a gatekeeper or that you have double standards. I'm not against inclusion, I just think the genuine characters people have been asking for in the past deserve to get in first, not a bunch of obvious meme picks that people keep asking just to see how far can Beanox go or claim they're the responsible for bringing that character to Crash Team Racing, attempting to copy what happened with Rilla and Yaya. Plus, the only remaining character who is a genuine meme pick is Farmer Ernest, and even then, he does deserve to come purely for the fact that he'd be the last character to be in and have been asked for more in the past than Mr. Crumb. Then Crumb deserves to afterwards as the last character.
Draft Draw is pretty spot on a lot of the time. He's pretty active on the fucking sub. Like, I see him everywhere. But, I mean, hey, I guess I'm not really complaining. Yeah, I mean, he's just really active. Giancho says,
For the love of God, get real. This is just a subreddit. We are not deciding anything.
well, that's wrong. That's clearly been demonstrated to be wrong.
I can post this many times a day about the rat sickle in CTR. That doesn't mean Beanox will wake up one day and say, man, we should totally listen to whatever shit they're spamming on Reddit. If you really think it works that way, then I'm at a loss of words.
Draft Draw replies saying,
You're lying to yourself if you think Beanox doesn't add characters based on people demanding them, and there's a lot of evidence that basically confirms this.
Giancho replies saying,
You're right, people totally asked for King Chicken and Baby Crash and Coco. Not to mention Zam and Zam or Nasty Nork instead of Ripto.
Draft Draw replies saying,
This is such a straw man. King Chicken is a joke original character, and the babies are filler characters to churn out Grand Prix and hold you on until the most requested characters came in.
And yeah, I just like to add one thing too. Zem and Zam were in Crash Nitro Kart, and they were bringing all the Crash Nitro Kart characters over to the remake in the first place. Anyways, he continues by saying,
Before the first 1.1 update for the game, the finals revealed that Rio, Kong, Mo, Baby T, and Tana were all supposed to be in the game, seemingly on launch, but got held back for the Grand Prix once they figured out its system. The Crash Tag Team Racing characters, Emperor Velo and Rillaroo, were nowhere to be found. Cue the leading months to CTR, people requested these characters like crazy. Beanox likely figured out fans wanted them, and in the very first update to the game, all of the characters not in the code from when they were developing the game appeared in there. Then we saw Willy and Velo were planned to appear, though we didn't know a month. Then in November, Willy and Velo's names disappeared and a new name, Yaya's, appeared in the data. After a series of months of people asking and spamming for her, when there was absolutely no code or anything related to her previously in the general character data mine.
yeah, exactly.
They do absolutely add characters based on fan demand and requests. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had most of the post-launch characters. Also, Zem and Zam were added because they were C&K characters. What sense would it make to not add them alongside the other C&K characters just because some people have a hate them for them?
Giancho replies saying,
So I guess you are pretending that Beanox didn't clearly say characters from CTTR are coming in the next months in June. Yeah, sure, they totally added them because people wrote posts on Reddit.
Draft Draw replies saying,
Did you read what I wrote? These characters weren't planned initially as the game files reveal. Then, as they saw the demand for them, these characters were planned for to be added during development, but not from the very beginning. And for all we know, it's more than likely the characters and tracks weren't even finished by the time that Activision rep said that. Gingerbread Joyride was the only concept art when we saw it in the roadmap. The general data mine only showed things Beanox were planning on adding, and were not tied specifically to anything before October, where Beta M started finding characters, cards, and items tied to months. And it's not only on Reddit, it's all across social media and forums. Reddit isn't the only place for Crash fans on the internet.
Giancho replies saying,
Man, there are 6 Grand Prix left, assuming that we are getting at least 3 characters each month, even though we can't be sure. There's no way characters like Willy or Velo or Viscount or Evil Twins will be left in the dust. And I can't stand the fact that instead of enjoying an interesting interview about a really obscure Crash game, you're here complaining about the spotlight Mr. Crumb is receiving these days that will disappear very soon. Just wait for the next Grand Prix. Every important character left will be added. Sorry if I sounded rude.
Sorry if I sounded rude. I want to add that Rillaroo's spotlight did not disappear very soon, and he got in before, other major characters and shit. So, just something to think about there, Giancho. Draft Draw replies saying,
Sorry for me sounding rude too. I don't dislike Mr. Crumb. It's just crazy for me that people are talking about him so much that I fear Beanox might not add the other characters. They've already done this with Yaya before, Willy and Velo, 2 highly anticipated characters which were data mined, but people spamming for her led to her inclusion before them, and I wasn't against her joining, but I'd rather have the 2 of them because they're more important. Hell, January seems it will only bring in 1 character. If the number for characters decrease, we might not see everyone.
and then there's no more replies after that. Alright, and here's a reply from Dany Q94 to something Draft Draw said earlier, that I read earlier. He says,
That's a stupid thought, no offense. We're telling you that the characters for the next 6 Grand Prix have long since been chosen, and if Mr. Crumb shows up, he will in a few months. The remaining characters, except for Velo, are not major characters. Put this objective thought in your head.
Okay, yikes there. That's a whole nother level of wrong. So Draft Draw replies saying,
The Evil Twins, Willy Wonka Cheeks, Madame Emberly, Evil Crash, and the Viscount are all major characters. 4 of these are the main villains of 3 games. One is a major character from a game, and the other is a boss character from a game. Even if you don't count the Viscount because Boom Bang was in the DS, Willy is literally in the same position as Fake Velo as the main villain of a racing game, and the Evil Twins are the last main villains of a platformer game. Only ones that aren't major are Bearminator, Rusty Walrus, and Farmer Ernest.
And then I jumped in and I said, there's so much crazy crumb love going on that these people are forgetting that characters like the Evil Twins, Willy, Viscount, etc. are actually major characters / main villains. Those characters definitely deserve to be in before Crumb and deserve to be the more prominent talking points. And then Draft Draw replied to me saying that
According to people now, the evil twins and Willy are mean pigs and aren't major characters anymore, but Velo is, for some reason. Also, apparently Viscount, Rusty, Bearminator, Madame Amberly, and Ernest are so minor that if you say they deserve to be in more than Crumb, you're a gatekeeper.
There's that. Okay, so that was a lot of craziness going on. This fucking fan base, dude. I mean, any kind of fan base, really. Tell me what you think of this in the comment section or whatever, blah, blah, blah. All that good stuff. You know what to do. Alright, see y'all later. Hope you enjoyed it.
There's some loads. Yeehaw. Have a TNT. Yeehaw. There's some loads. Yeehaw. Have a TNT. Yeehaw. There's some loads. Yeehaw. Have a TNT. Yeehaw. There's some loads. Yeehaw. Have a TNT. What an asshole.
Bring me the credit cards, Crush. That is all I can say for now.
We are the stolen of credit cards.
Shut the fuck up. Don't make me say it.